What is the dumbest idea you have ever had that actually worked? In my freshman year of college, my grades were really not great. And my parents were really strict about getting good grades. When my dad asked to see my grades, I panicked and did the inspect command on the computer where you can change typefaces on the screen to read different words and letters. I changed all of my STTY grades to good grades. My dad was so happy that I did good my first year of school. He asked me to print my results. I did. And turns out he had to send them to our car insurance company for a good student discount. Ultimately, I committed insurance fraud by accident. But I got the discount. When I was like 7 years old, I was playing in my back garden with those incredibly bouncy little balls you got. Just bouncing them high off the house and letting them bounce randomly before trying to catch them. As you did. One time I went for this huge throw off the wall and it bounced crazily off various surfaces so fast I completely lost track of it. So my 7-year-old logic was to stand back in the same place and throw another ball the same way. I watched it bounce this way and that about 10 times before finally hitting a plant and coming to a rest in a flower bed. I went over to pull back the foliage and sure enough there were both balls literally lying touching each other in the mud. At the time I was like, yep. Makes sense. But over the years since then I've often thought about it and how the hell it worked. Wearing a motorcycle helmet while snowblowing. I did it because I missed riding. When I was younger I got called into HR because I drew a very detailed picture of a penis. It was really good. The HR meeting happened like a week after I drew it and my only defense was I don't recall doing that. Do you happen to have the picture? It might jog my memory. They didn't have it of course because I had it. And because I didn't confess they couldn't douche tea. Investigation results inconclusive. A storm broke a limb on a tree hanging over my house in my backyard. But it was still hanging on by a few splinters. I didn't want it to fall. And it wasn't in a place where I could use my ladder to get to it. So I found some rope. Tied a brick to it. Threw the brick and rope over the limb. Made a crude rope swing. And swung and pulled at the branch until it finished breaking. It wasn't until I was using the chainsaw to cut it up that I realized how many times during my stupid idea I could have easily hurt or even killed myself. Our power was out due to a storm. I had a camp stove to use for boiling water to make a coffee pour through. But I couldn't use my electric grinder for the coffee beans. I tried fashioning a mortar and pestle but it was taking too long. So, I put the coffee beans in a couple of Ziploc bags. Placed the bag right behind a car tire. Then ran over it back and forth a couple of times to crush the beans. Worked like a charm. Edit to add, lol it took reading through a few comments but now I see I wrote mortal and not mortar. Comma I tried fashioning a mortal. Calm down there Prometheus. A friend and I once snuck 15 people into a warp tour by giving them some bracelets from a party supply store and clipboards full of paper. Walked up to the side gate and said we were with Rock the Vote. The security guard waved us right in. Edit. Thanks for the silver. I forgot to bring a resume to a job interview. But I had an index card in my bag. I cut the index card in half and wrote my name, my contact info, and creative problem solver in my best handwriting. And gave a copy of my business card to both the interviewers. I got the job. When I was young and broke I bought a sofa from a used furniture store. I had no way to take the sofa home. I went to a used car lot a couple of blocks away and took a truck for a test drive. Not my idea but my mom's. I dropped one of my earrings and couldn't find it so she threw my other earring on the floor and it happened to land next to the first one. Put Jesus and his Wi-Fi password in church. Ha. Jesus really is the answer. I'm stuck on a cliff. But if I jump at a really sharp angle at that gravel field, I could just slide down there and be fine. Just like in TV. Every time I think about this I am amazed I'm not either flattened by a rock or impact against something. Childhood really is just the tutorial level sometimes. In college I was taking a class that required me to purchase an online textbook and workbook that was registered under your name. Basically ensuring that each student would have to buy a new online copy each semester instead of buying used textbooks. I had a friend who took this class a semester before me, so we came up with the idea to message customer service and explain that I had recently gotten married, so my last name had changed, and I legally changed my first name from my friend's first name to my first name, and I would need them to change it in their system. It totally worked, and the rep even congratulated me on my marriage. I think it's nearly criminal to enforce students to buy new books instead of used ones, especially when it's the professor's own textbook. This idea could have easily gotten me fired if it went wrong. I was working as art director at an animation studio, making videos for clients. One client was especially pesky about the use of yellow in the background. They wanted it to be that of their logo, which was this horrible neon piss yellow. We advised against it, but after numerous calls we had to cave and gave a version with that color. They hated it and asked for a change. What followed were 12 versions with numerous calls in between, tweaking the color over and over. Eventually I got tired of it and just sent the original version again. I didn't even bother to rename the file. The client said, "This looks exactly the way I wanted. Thank you." How that ever went right I still have no idea. Bet my husband I could fix the dent in the car with a plunger. It worked. Edit. It is clear I should have used a massive suction DLDO instead. I used to know a guy who, every week, would order his Saturday night curry for delivery while sitting in the pub and then walk over the road to the curry house and get it and himself delivered home. This went on for about 10-12 weeks. One week, we were sitting having a pint and the owner of the curry house walked in, took his order, and had him picked up from the pub. He said it was easier for everyone concerned. I once faked being sick when I was in middle school and told my mom I had a sore throat and felt a cold coming on. She took me to the doctor and it turned out that I did, in fact, have strep throat lol. Task failed successfully. Dressing like a redneck to pick up chicks. Went to college in the south, but the guys there were all very preppy. I thought because a lot of the girls grew up in the south, they would be drawn to more of a redneck vibe that not many people on campus had. So I bought a camo fishing hat. Bobcat tire blew during a job. Had another tire, but no jack. Positioned the Bobcat behind a dump truck. Bobcat then tries to lift the ass end of the dump truck. Dump truck hella heavy. Bobcat lifted itself instead. Tire changed and back to work. There was a swarm of hornets that had made a nest under the front of our porch with only one specific narrow entry in or out. Spray wouldn't work and it was right under our front door, so had no way to keep exterminating them. Then I realized why not wearing blades of metal? Full stop. We did have an old 50s metal fan and I could maybe blow them away from the entrance so they had no way to get in. The unanticipated effect was that it worked, though after a few hours had created a Civil War battlefield of dead or dying hornets piling up like a zombie tower in World War Z. Every few moments you'd hear a thunk as another hornet fell into the trap. So satisfying. We had a noisy rotating rooster weather vane, loud enough to keep people awake on windy nights, despite having been lubed. So I filled the hole the rooster rotates in with Crisco, even though people said it was a dumb idea and wouldn't work. Never had to lube it again because the Crisco didn't break down like other lubes. Far from the dumbest working idea in the thread, but I once got an extra day to work on a video project in high school by coming to class with a video that was just a quarter second of blackness. Eagerly volunteering to go first, then acting confused and scared when the file didn't work. The teacher took pity on me and told me to just bring it the following day. And I got to finish it that evening and still got full credit as if I did it on time. Was really desperate to leave past employer after 15 years. Had been applying and interviewing and striking out. Finally got an interview at a place where, at the time, I felt, meh, I am not really sure this is right for me. But anything is better than where I am at. Instead of prepping for the interview, rehearsing answers, etc., I pulled an Office Space. I was cocky, brash, unconcerned. Made it seem like I was happy where I was at and didn't really care if I got the job or not. They called me back the next week and I waited a week to return their call. Same deal with the second interview. When they offered me the job, I hemmed and hawed. Said I needed to think about it really hard. And that it was a big move for me. Etc. etc. I came back and demanded well over $15. 000 above what they were offering in salary. They accepted. Using a sewing needle to remove a bit of dirt that was making one of my records skip. Bear in mind my hands are shaky as hell, so it was certainly very tense and there was a danger of f***ing up the whole thing. Edit. I hated my math teacher and she was making us do a project on patterns even though we were in 7th grade. So my pattern was a series of increasingly longer sideways penises. My parents used to run a bed and breakfast. And we used to keep a section of the house locked, only light security. Was just supposed to stop guests accidentally going into our living space. We used to keep the key on top of a door frame. Turns out the frame was hollow and there was a hole on the top. I put the key up there. It fell into the hole but didn't sound like it dropped all the way to the floor. 14-year-old me didn't realize taking the door frame off isn't a major job. So I was a bit worried my parents would kill me. Found myself a wire coat hanger. Straightened it out and attached a magnet to the end to go key fishing. It was more out of desperation than anything else, but it somehow worked. I used a soap bottle as a makeshift sink plunger. Got a really long drill bit stuck in a piece of thick wood, butcher's block. I tried everything I could think of to yank it out. My solution that ended up working for me was attaching the drill bit to a chain. Put the chain on my truck. And have a piece of wood kind of stuck between two branches of a tree. I drove off slowly and it popped right out. Edit. To the many wondering on how I hooked up the bit to the chain. The drill bit was a long spade drill bit. The end sticking out of the block was long enough that I could bend into a little hook. Attached the chain to the hook. Bent the hook in a little further. And ta-da! It was now another link in the chain. In university I was late on an assignment that was supposed to be in my T.A.'s Dropbox by noon that day. I didn't manage to get there until almost 3, so I was sure he had already emptied it. Now, the drop boxes were literal boxes in cubbies with a slot on the front and a lock on them that prevented them from being pulled out. The rack holding them was just a basic metal frame with about 5 rows of boxes. My T.A.'s box was somewhere in the middle of the shelf. So I figured, I'm late anyways. Why not take a chance? And slipped my assignment into the box below my T.A.'s box. I got my assignment handed back a few weeks later than everyone else and it had a note from another T.A. scribbled on it that said, "Looks like this fell into my box by mistake." I got full marks on the assignment. Hit the router slap. Thanks. One time I sent a letter to a local address by putting the return address as the address I wanted it to go to. Not putting postage. And dropping it off in a public mailbox. Went to the return to sender due to insufficient postage. It probably wouldn't work in this day and age, but back when I was young I was tired of retail and wanted an office job. I just lied my ass off and pulled a total George Costanza what with friends coached to answer their phones as a business and such. Got hired as an admin assistant and been steadily moving up since. Breaking into my own house through the kitchen window using a piece of wire and a wooden table after I was locked out. Back in the flip phone days. I had dropped mine and the screen stopped working. I could make and receive calls. But the screen was just completely blank. I put up with it for a couple of weeks because I couldn't afford a new phone. But one day I had the thought of, well, if dropping the phone made the connection loose, maybe the same thing can fix it, and threw my phone at the ground. I picked it back up and the screen was working. Edit. Thanks for making this my top comment of all time. Guys. Now everyone knows how much of an idiot I was am. Edit 2. Specifically to piss off you throw downtown 69. Thanks for the gold. Kind stranger. I can't believe I got my very first gold. It's such an honor. XD. Years ago. The foundation of my house would let water in right at the seam of the wall and hatchway. I decided to dig down so I could seal it from the outside. I got a few feet down before I couldn't reach with a shovel. So what did this genius do? I went in head first and kept digging. But then my arms were getting tired and I decided I should quit. I'm now doing a handstand in a narrow pit and have no way to back out of it. I live far enough from neighbors that yelling would do nothing. After a few minutes of coming to terms with the fact that this is how I die at 28 years old, I decide I will try to walk up the foundation wall with my hands one last time. And it worked. It could have ended quite badly. In the end, it worked. I was able to seal the issue from the outside. Edit. Thanks for the silver kind Redditor. So close to winning a Darwin Award and you had to go mess it up by surviving. I was like 7 and had a loose tooth that I couldn't pull out. Tried to string attached to the door. Didn't work. So I tied a string to it and tied the other end to my dog's collar. Threw a tennis ball. Bye bye tooth. We were at a friend's house about to cook a roast. It needed to be patted dry with paper towel. But he was all out. I semi-jokingly suggested using a couple slices of bread. We all chuckled at the idea. It worked perfectly. Had a video card die on me. Thought that maybe the solder had melted away from it overheating. So I had the idea to stick it in the oven briefly to melt the solder into place. Looked online and it is apparently a normal thing to do. Worked like a charm. Something broke on the front wheel of my car while I was on a cross-country trip. And it made a terrible noise and smoke. It was the middle of the night and the shops in the town we pulled into were all closed. I jacked it up to see what was wrong. Took off the wheel. And then the jack tipped over and the car dropped onto the exposed brake disc. I did it again and the same thing happened. I jacked it up again. Still couldn't figure out what was wrong. Put the wheel back on. And whatever it was had been fixed by the jolts. I drove that car for years with no further problems. In college my buddy and I took an investing class and for one of the projects we had a month to invest fake dollars into the stock market and see which team would have the most money after a month. It was spring semester so we put all of our fake money into Heinz. Thinking there would be a spike in ketchup and mustard sales as the weather got warmer. The next day, Berkshire Hathaway purchased the entire Heinz company and the professor accused us of insider trading. We had no idea what we were doing. Edit. Hey you man dog Joe it famous. Edit 2. To clarify. We didn't actually get in trouble for insider trading but the professor came over to us before the next class and was like what happened here? If I stop showing co-workers how to use Excel, I'll get to do all the easy Excel stuff while simultaneously being patted on the back for doing the hard stuff on the team no one else good. Basically. Unless you want to be super upper management and give your life to your work play clueless. Don't let them know you could simplify a report that takes several days into literally minutes. HHHHHHHHH. Someone else will take tech credit and then you'd have more to do. Utility company wanted me to fill out my last month's bill amount when registering to pay my very first bill online. I put in a for that field. Thinking this was just going to a database lookup. And maybe they weren't sanitizing their database inputs. Sure enough. I was right. And it worked.